Part 2, Chapter 6 of The Man Who Lost Himself. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Man Who Lost Himself by H. de Vere Stacpoole. Part 2, Chapter 6 The Net. He saw something else. He was automatically barred from the Savoy, and barred from the American consul. And on top of that something else. He had committed a very grave mistake in accepting for a moment his position. He should have spoken at once that morning, spoken to Mr. Church, told his tale and made explanations. Failing that, he should have made explanations before leaving the house. He had left in Rochester's clothes, he had acted the part of Rochester. He rolled the paper into a ball, tossed it into the gutter, and entered Charing Cross to continue his soliloquy. He had eaten Rochester's food, smoked one of his cigars, accepted his cane and gloves. All that might have been explainable with Rochester's aid, but Rochester was dead. No one knew that Rochester was dead. To go back to the Savoy and establish his own identity, he would have to establish the fact of Rochester's death, tell the story of his own intoxication, and make people believe that he was an innocent victim. An innocent victim who had gone to another man's house and palpably masqueraded for some hours as that other man, walking out of the house in his clothes and carrying his stick, an innocent victim who owed a bill at the Savoy. Why, every man, the family included you may be sure, would be finding the innocent victim in Rochester. What were Jones's letters doing on Rochester? That was a nice question for a puzzle-headed jury to answer. By what art did Jones, the needy American adventurer, that was what they would call him, impose himself upon Rochester and induce Rochester to order him to be taken to Carlton House Terrace? Oh, there were a lot more questions to be asked at that phantom court of justice, where Jones beheld himself in the dock trying to explain the inexplicable. The likeness would not be any use for whitewashing. It would only deepen the mystery, make the affair more extravagant. Besides, the likeness most likely by this time would be pretty well spoiled. By the time of the assizes it would be only verifiable by photographs. Sitting on a seat in Charing Cross Station, he cogitated this, chasing the most fantastic ideas, yet gripped all the time by the cold fact. The fact that the only door in London open to him was the door of 10A Carlton House Terrace. Unable to return to the Savoy, he possessed nothing in the world but the clothes he stood up in and the walking stick he held in his hand. Dressed like a lord, he was poorer than any tramp, for the simple reason that his extravagantly fine clothes barred him from begging and from the menial work that is the only recourse of the suddenly destitute. Given time, and with his quick business capacity, he might have made a fight to obtain a clerkship or some post in a store, but he had no time. It was near the luncheon hour and he was hungry. That fact alone was an indication of how he was placed as regards time. He was a logical man. He saw clearly that only two courses lay before him: to go to the Savoy and tell his story and get food and lodging in the police station, or to go to 10A Carlton House Terrace and get food and lodging as Rochester. Both ideas were hateful, but he reckoned, and with reason, that if he took the first course, arrest and ignominy, and probably imprisonment would be certain, whereas if he took the second, he might be able to bluff the thing out till he could devise means of escape from the net that surrounded him. He determined on the second course. The servants, and even that scarecrow woman in the feather boa, had accepted him as good coin. There was no reason why they should not go on accepting him for a while. For the matter of that, there was no reason why they should not go on accepting him forever. Even in the midst of his disturbance of mind and general tribulation, the humor of the latter idea almost made him smile. The idea of living and dying as Lord Rochester, as a member of the English aristocracy, always being "my lorded," served by flunkeys with big calves, and inducted every morning into his underpants by that guy in the sleeved jacket. This preposterous idea, more absurd than any dream, was yet based on a substantive foundation. In fact, he had that morning put it in practice, and unless a miracle occurred, he would have to continue putting it in practice for some days to come. However, Jones, fortunately or unfortunately for himself, was a man of action and no dreamer. He dismissed the ideas and came to practical considerations. If he had to hold on to the position, he would have to make more sure of his ground. He rose, found his way into Charing Cross Station Hotel, and obtained a copy of "Who's Who" from the hotel clerk. He turned the pages till he found the R's. Here was his man: Rochester, 21st Earl of, created 1431. Arthur Coningsby Delamere, Baron Coningsby of Wilton, ex-lieutenant, Rifle Brigade. Married Teresa, second daughter of Sir Peter Mason, Baronet, Q.V. Educated Heidelberg. Owns about 21,000 acres. Address 10A, Carlton House Terrace, Rochester Court, Rochester. The Hatch, Colney, Wiltshire. Clubs: Senior Conservative, National Sporting, Pelican. That was only a part of the sayings of Who's Who regarding Rochester, Arthur Coningsby Delamere, the last decadent descendant of a family that had been famous in long past years for its power, prodigality, and prolificacy. If Jones could have climbed up his own family tree, he might have found on some distaff branch the reason of his appalling likeness to Rochester, Arthur Coningsby Delamere. But this was a pure matter of speculation, and it did not enter the mind of Jones. He closed the book, returned it, and walked out. Now that his resolve was made, his fighting spirit was roused. In other words, he felt the same recklessness that a man feels who is going into battle, the regardlessness of consequence which marks your true explorer. For Stanley on the frontier of darkest Africa, Scott on the ice rim of the Beardmore Glacier, had before them positions and districts simple in comparison to those that now fronted Jones, who had before him the western and southwestern London districts, with all they contained in the way of natives in top hats, natives painted and powdered, tribes with tribal laws of which he knew little, tricks of which he knew less, convenances, Jew-poos, and fetishes. And he was entering this dark and intricate and dangerous country, not as an explorer carrying beads and Bibles, but disguised as a top man, a chief. Burton's position when he journeyed to Mecca disguised as a Mohammedan was easy compared to the position of Jones. Burton knew the ritual. He made one mistake in it, it is true, but then he was able to kill the man who saw him make that mistake. Jones could not protect himself in this way, even if the valet in the sleeved jacket were to discover him in a position analogous to Burton's. He was not thinking of any of these things at the present moment, however. He was thinking of luncheon. If he were condemned to play the part of a lord for a while, he was quite determined to take his salary in the way of everything he wanted. Yet it seemed that to obtain anything he wanted in this new and extraordinary position, He would have to take something he did not want. He wanted luncheon, but he did not want to go back to Carlton House Terrace. At least, not just now. Those flunkeys, the very thought of them, gave him indigestion. More than that, he was afraid of them. A fear that was neither physical nor moral, but more in the nature of the fear of women for mice, or the supposed fear of the late Lord Roberts for cats. The solemn church, the mercurial valet, the men with calves, belonged to a tribe that maybe had done Jones to death in some past life. Either bored him to death or bludgeoned him, it did not matter. The antipathy was there, and it was powerful. At the corner of Northumberland Avenue an idea came to him. This Rochester belonged to several clubs. Why not go and have luncheon at one of them on credit? It would save him for the moment from returning to the door towards which fate was shepherding him, and he might be able to pick up some extra wrinkles about himself and his position. The idea was indicative of the daring of the man, though there was little enough danger in it. He was sure of passing muster at a club, since he had done so at home. He carried the names of two of Rochester's clubs in his mind, the Pelican and the Senior Conservative. The latter seemed the more stodgy, the least likely to offer surprises in the way of shoulder-clapping, irresponsible parties who might want to enter into general conversation. He chose it, asked a policeman for directions, and made for Pall Mall. Here another policeman pointed out to him the building he was in search of. It stood on the opposite side of the way, a building of grey stone, vast and serious of feature, yet opulent and hinting of the best in all things relative to comfort. It was historical. Disraeli had come down those steps, and the great Lord Salisbury had gone up them. Men, to enter this place, had to be born, not made, and even these selected ones had to put their names down at birth, if they wished for any chance of lunching there before they lost their teeth and hair. It took 21 years for the elect to reach this place, and on the way they were likely to be slain by black balls. Victor Jones just crossed the road and went up the steps. End of chapter 6. Recording by Roger Moline.